Welcome to CivilNet. This week we saw yet another crackdown in Turkey against the media, against opposition politicians, against filmmakers, against police officers. This time it was those who were linked to Fethullah Gulen, a Muslim cleric who is in self-imposed exile in the US, who used to be quite close allies with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, but now is one of his most ardent rivals. Joining me to talk about this recent wave of crackdowns in Turkey is Amberin Zaman. She is a journalist, a really well-known journalist, columnist. She works for The Economist and for Taraf. Amberin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Earlier we did speak about, the crackdowns against media, and this is a common theme we've often heard in Turkey. But this latest, I think there was a list of 31 people, there were warrants issued, and almost 24 across 13 cities in Turkey were arrested. What has been the political fallout?
Well, of course, it's had a sort of an earthquake effect here because people were talking about it, speculating for months already that these arrests would take place. And the fact that one of the people who was arrested is the managing editor of Turkey's largest circulation newspaper called Zaman, which is closely affiliated with the Gulen group, of course, has amplified the effect of these arrests because in many ways, this man, Amberin Zaman, the managing editor of Zaman, is widely perceived as a spokesman almost for Fethullah Gulen, the cleric who you mentioned in your introduction. He is still being detained, interrogated, and there's talk of him actually being arrested and convicted on very strange charges, I have to say.
I wanted to ask, what kind of charges are being laid at this point?
Well, it's all very hazy. I mean, they have been arrested in connection with some unspecified terrorist activities. What we're seeing in the media, what's filtering into the pro-government media, is that they were somehow trying to frame a rival Islamic fraternity that has been openly critical of Fethullah Gulen. They've been trying to frame them as terrorists. This is the allegation being brought against the people who were arrested. The fact that they allegedly fabricated evidence so they could go after this rival Islamic group and have them jailed. This is sort of the essence of it, and it has some very sort of bizarre angles to it because allegedly Fethullah Gulen, who is the mastermind of this operation, was sending instructions to his followers in the police force via Zaman newspaper and also via some soap operas that are aired on Gulen-affiliated TV channels, which is why some screenwriters, scriptwriters have also been arrested.
Yeah, when we heard that, it was quite amazing. I mean, why are screenwriters or scriptwriters for soap operas also being arrested? Amberin, please explain to me, if you will. Fethullah Gulen, as we said, he's now in Pennsylvania, I believe. Is he really that much of a threat to the Turkish state, or is he being perceived or presented in that manner so that there is an excuse then to try and silence opposition voices in the country?
First of all, I wouldn't say he's perceived as an enemy of the Turkish state. He's being presented as an enemy of the Turkish state, but he is clearly perceived as an enemy of Turkey's president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and his ruling Justice and Development Party. And this perception has been sort of forming for some time now, but really sort of climaxed in December of last year, when this corruption probe that targeted Erdogan's family and his inner circle of business associates and political allies blew up. And you're probably familiar with many of the allegations that somehow connect these people to money laundering, gold smuggling, bribery and misappropriating state funds, sort of illegally rezoning places so that these people could benefit from construction projects, turn quick, profitable deals, a very wide array of very serious allegations. And of course, the government has sought to present this as a plot against it, a plot that aims to overthrow the government, and one that's supported by the so-called global interest lobby. And this, it's kind of sounds terribly conspiratorial, but allegedly includes, Jewish bankers, Western publications, including my own, The Economist. And the whole aim is that they're out to sort of bring down this government because they're so successful. They've done such a good job of making Turkey a much stronger, more influential place. And so they need to be removed. This is the sort of thinking that they bring to this case against the Gulenists, saying that they're the pawns of this global interest rate lobby.
Tell me if I'm wrong in my in my perception that Erdogan is increasingly becoming. I'm trying to find the right terminology here, that he is seeing conspiracy theories everywhere. He is probably becoming perhaps more isolated as well. I mean, some of the announcements, some of the decisions that he's been taking have raised quite a lot of eyebrows, not only in Turkey, but also in the West with the European Union. The European Union's President Martin Schulz, in the plenary session of the European Parliament, specifically outlined that that Europe is not pleased with Turkey's actions, especially this past week. Is Erdogan becoming more and more isolated?
That's certainly one way of looking at it. But before I answer that question, I also want to make it very clear that this row between Fethullah Gulen and Erdogan is very much of a power struggle more than anything else. And let's not forget that they were also very close allies for many years, and that the Gulenists, alleged Gulenists and the bureaucracy, the judiciary, the police force were instrumental in bringing charges against, hundreds of army officers who were accused of coup plotting. And as you remember, critics of those court cases claimed that much of the evidence was fabricated, in the same way that the Gulenists now say that the evidence against them is being fabricated. So there's a certain irony there. And to get back to your question about Erdogan being isolated, it's not surprising if he is, because after all, there are no checks and balances left in this country. There is tremendous pressure on the media. And so, dissident voices are being sort of removed. Yes, silenced. And so the end result is that there's this echo chamber of flattery, of endorsement of anything that the Prime Minister, the then Prime Minister, now a President, does. And he's surrounded himself with sycophants, with advisors who, make the most bizarre claims, like, for instance, that this global interest rate lobby has tried to murder the President using telekinesis. This is,
but obviously he must have a constituency that wants to hear that, or am I mistaken here? He's speaking to that constituency, is he not?
Absolutely, and unfortunately this country has always been predisposed to these conspiracy theories. I mean, there's not that much difference between what he's saying and what, for instance, the Kemalists have been saying for years in this country. Always the tendency to blame everything on outsiders and never taking any responsibility for their own actions. It's always somebody else's fault. And does Tayyip Erdogan care what the European Union has to say? I don't think he does at all. And he seems to, enjoy a lot of support from his own people, which is why he got elected, or rather from his own constituents, why he got elected in a first round in August during the presidential elections. This kind of rhetoric has strong appeal, and people believe this stuff. So he, in brackets, gets away with it. It's only going to catch up with them all if it starts to affect the economy. And we're seeing signs of that. Soon after Mr. Erdogan made his comments about the European Union, telling them to mind their own business, the Turkish lira began to to lose value against the dollar. It shed 4% of its value in a single day. It's continuing to wobble. And as you know, Turkey's economy is, or let's say, healthier compared to, say, European economies even, and other emerging market economies, but it does remain quite vulnerable. And if the flow of what we call hot money stops because of perceived, political instability that could indeed erupt into violence, then of course they'll have a lot of trouble turning around their foreign exchange debt, of plugging the foreign account deficit, etc. Already you know that growth has come down, and it's simply not sustainable because Turkey has a very young population. You have more and more people coming into the labor force every year. Add to that some 2 million Syrian refugees in this country. So, it's quite vulnerable.
Sure. And just as a final question, again, this is speculation on my part, or to ask you, to answer this question in particular, but are the voices in the media who have been critical of Erdogan and his government, will they now start to sort of backtrack and be careful of every word that they write? Will there be now sort of self-censorship taking place?
Well, it's not now. It's already happening. Everything you've just described is happening. If people don't want to lose their jobs, they have to sort of be very careful. They are constantly called in by newspaper proprietors and admonished about their writing. People have had to I have friends who withdraw their columns because, the newspaper won't run them as is, and they've started setting up their own websites where they publish their original columns. It's a very toxic atmosphere and a very oppressive one for the media in Turkey today.
Well, Amberin, thank you so much, and I don't know, much patience, and hopefully we'll see how this all plays out in the coming days and weeks. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'd like to remind our viewers that my guest via Skype from Istanbul was a well-known and respected journalist and columnist Amberin Zaman. Stay with CivilNet.